My lesson plan focuses on exercise 53 from chapter 6 of Chekhov's book on the technique of acting. In this video, I'm going to summarize all 3 lesson plans, then go over the 4 stages of a production according to Chekhov because it relates and ties in nicely with my lesson plans. I used a backwards design to create my lesson plan, so I started with how I wanted it to end and then worked backward to create the beginning and the middle. I knew I wanted the end result to be an improvisation exercise, so then I worked backwards until I got to the beginning, which would consist of an introduction of characters and character development. Lesson 1 would be an introduction to characters, how to develop basic characters, and how to portray them on stage, eliminating the actor behind the character. This is where exercise 53 would come in. Lesson 2 would be about character development and character backgrounds. This is where we would use a character from lesson 1 and go deeper into that character, finding out their motives and how they would talk, walk, or what they looked like. Lesson 3 would be the final project, where we would test out these characters in an improvisation exercise. In Lesson 1, we would go over Introduction to Characters, how to create a character, and the creative freedom each student has in making up these characters. This is where we would execute Exercise 53, which is about creating 5 different characters in a given amount of time. I chose 20 minutes. Since you have 4 minutes per character, these characters would be given a very simple and basic outline to them. In the last 10 minutes, the students can elaborate on all characters or choose one to go into detail with. This is an introduction to the next lesson, which is about backstories and motivations with each character. In Lesson 2, students have to choose one character to go on a creative journey with. This will be their persona for the final project. In this lesson, students will have the opportunity to think of a backstory for their character. They're also going to think about what their character looks like, which leads them to the experiment with how they would walk, talk, or interact with others. However, today the students will be walking around the room and not interacting with their peers. This is where the students are figuring out their character and slowly letting go of themselves as they take on a new persona. Lesson 3 is where we have the final improvisation project. There are 3 parts to this lesson. Before the exercise starts, the students are given a little bit of time to finalize their new persona before we go on a test drive. The exercise will last 25 minutes total. During the first 10 minutes of the exercise, each student will be given a situation that their character must go through as they're interacting with their peers. These situations could range from in a hurry to catch a bus, dropping a carton of milk, or any other silly scenario. In the next 10 minutes, students will be given an item in a paper bag, and each character must use this item at least once while interacting with their peers. Lastly, the final 5 minutes are spent walking to their backpacks to grab character journals and sitting down in a circle as your character. You must stay in character, even if you're already sitting, until all students and the teacher are in a circle. I set aside 20 minutes for students and teachers to reflect on their experiences throughout the entire process and on just this lesson 3 and their final improvisation exercise. I picked out the 4 stages of a production as my quote or multiple quotes from Chekhov's book. To put it simply, stage 1 is just after casting and before rehearsals start. Stage 2 is the first rehearsals before actors go off book. Stage 3 ends with the introduction to sets, costumes, and other technical additions. Lastly, stage 4 is just before opening night. As a hair and makeup designer, costume designer, and a previous set and lighting designer, I always loved the first and third stages. I like sitting through production meetings and seeing all the creative ideas flow before casting even occurs. The first ideas after just reading the script are always a bit magical. But then once the cast is involved, you're able to tweak some ideas to fit the actor a bit. It helps so that the character and actor are one and the same. I was never really part of stage 2 as a designer. This is where the actors and director work together. If it's a musical, the music director is also around. This is the stage where the actors get to show themselves through the characters. Stage 3, like mentioned before, is one of my favorites. The cast's first look at costumes, sets, lighting, is always something special. Seeing their eyes light up at their future playground, as I like to call it. Bringing rehearsals to the stage is always intimidating, but motivates the actors because it's another added aspect to their performance. I have seen so many cast members portray their character even more in costume than they do in street clothes. It's almost like with different clothing, they can fully embrace their new persona. In stage 4, the show is basically set. Opening night is near and the actors are getting stage jitters. This is always a heartwarming stage because the cast members are close friends by now and they are encouraging each other to do their best even when they think they are failing. I have learned a bunch of new techniques from Chekhov's book on the technique of acting, but I also read some things that I learned in my undergrad. I focused on technical theater instead of performance while in college, so putting the mind and body together wasn't something I was familiar with. But when designing sets, lighting, and other things, I was doing exactly that. Putting my mind to work and imagining my body in the space so I could think about how the performers would look. I just didn't realize or acknowledge that I was using a psychophysical awareness to achieve such tasks. Mind-body awareness goes deeper than I thought. Between my dance classes and theater classes, I never thought to put the two of them together. The many stages of putting on a theatrical production are way more elaborate than the audience knows. I knew this as a technical theater major, but it's always something I like to mention. Everyone recognizes the cast members who performed in the show, but most audience members never recognize the production team. Lastly, getting through Chekhov's book is not for the weak. I definitely struggled a bit reading through each chapter. The language was a bit hard for me to understand at times, but I never did well in any of my psychology courses I took.